Well, thank you so much for everyone being here today. Of course, we're here to celebrate Alyson Noël's release of Stealing Infinity. Yay! And thank you so much, Marlene Perez, for being here. Of course, with I'm with the band, and your latest one in this series. I'm in the band. What was the latest one? I'm sorry.
This is the latest one.
That's the latest one. Okay.
You are correct. The first one is the Afterlife of the Party.
Thank you. I always mix them up for some reason. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you have purchased the book yet, for everyone that's out virtually, you can click the link that's below and get that through our website. We still will have signed copies. If you want to give the store a call, maybe we can get your personalizations in time. Mm-hmm. Thank you again. If you have any questions on virtual people that you want to submit, click the Ask a Question button, the link below. Otherwise, all of y'all that are here in person, we'll get your questions about halfway through the event. I'm going to take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for coming out tonight, you guys. It's the release day for Stealing Infinity. And I'm with my good friend Marlene Perez, who I've known forever.
We had this conversation not too long ago, and we're like, how long have we known each other?
Yeah,
a long,
I know.
long time.
We took up some space just trying to figure that out. Never came to any real conclusion.
But you always have those friends that you can laugh with and celebrate with, and sometimes cry with.
Sometimes commiserate, depending.
So, but today we're celebrating.
Yeah,
we're in celebrating.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Alyson a couple of questions, and she told me that she's either going to say thank you next.
If I don't like the question,
she's going to say thank you next,
she's
going to answer.
Pass. Just pass.
So we're gonna start with some really easy ones. Allegedly.
Make sure to get this in the camp.
Oh yeah, look at that! Such a beautiful cover. Like, have you guys checked this cover out?
Yeah,
I think it's amazing cover. Yeah. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what made you decide on the title Stealing Infinity? Because that's what you know me in titles, and I love your titles so much. It just like encapsulates everything that you want in a book.
Well, if you knew me as well as we think you do, you would know I did not come up with this title. I'm just not very good at titles, and I'm not going to lie about that. When I sold the book, I sold it under the title Stolen Beauty, which my agent and I came up with together. Before that, I was calling it, I think, Winds of Time or something, and my agent said it sounded like a folk ballad. She's like, the winds of time are blowing. So we nixed that really quick, and then we settled on Stolen Beauty. And then my publisher said, what do you think about Stealing Infinity? I said, yes, 100%. I think you nailed it. It's a great title. I mean, I'm just not that good at them. I think I've named maybe 2 of my books, and this is book number 28, if that tells you anything. So I think it really encompasses what the story's about. It gives a real hint to that, and it just sounds cool. So it does all the things a good title is supposed to do.
And I'm going to ask like questions, but I'm going to try to refrain from any spoilers. So again, if it goes into spoiler territory,
I'll just say pass.
Yes.
Next.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us? Give us the 5-second summary of Stealing Infinity.
Yeah.
What I know it's about time travel. Am I allowed to say that?
You are.
Okay.
You are. It's a not a very well kept secret. I mean, the really quick elevator pitch is Da Vinci Code meets Riverdale, which is probably a pretty good summation when you do the meets kind of thing to explain something. It's about a girl, a teenager named Natasha, and she I mean, I have to say, I was a lot like Natasha was at that age. I was sort of lost. I was failing myself. I just was drowning in apathy and just kind of unable to stop this downward spiral that I was in. And that's sort of where she is when we meet her. And she befriends a kind of mysterious, cool girl named Elodie Blue. And one day they ditch school, they end up at a club, and Natasha wakes up the next morning and she's being framed for a crime she didn't commit. none of this is a spoiler because it's just going to be right there in the opening chapters. And this journey of having that happen leads her to this mysterious time traveling academy that is, this remote place that she ends up at, the Grey Wolf Academy. And it is a school for time travelers.
I love it.
And shenanigans ensue.
And there, I hear tell there might be a hot guy or two.
There's at least one, and there's definitely another one that makes an appearance as the book continues. Yeah. What's an Alyson Noël book without a hot guy in it, right? At least one or two.
Wow.
That's half the fun of writing right there.
So like that makes me really curious, because how do you look for photos when you're picturing your characters? Do you search out photos? Is it all just mental? Do you have say an actor or someone in mind when you're thinking of specific hot guy? Or is it more just like, I'm going to Frankenstein this dude and he's going to be what I want him to be?
It's kind of both. I mean, for the place, some of the atmospheric elements and stuff of the book, I have to say, I used to be, back when we had magazines in the world, like pre-pandemic, when we were also reading lots of magazines, I was like a magazine addict, and I would literally get like however many fashion magazines there were, I had them all every month delivered to my house, and I would go through, and when I saw like a really interesting editorial spread or something, I would like just pull the pictures and keep them in a file. So I had for years this file filled with just like cool looking, moody shoots of things or places or people or whatever. And so when I was creating this book, I, like I do with any book, I go back through these tear sheets in a sense that I had. And I had so many that were just perfect for this book. So when we meet Elodie back at the academy, the outfit that she's wearing is this exact outfit that I saw in Vogue magazine, like maybe 10 years ago, worn by this European princess. She's a European princess in real life, and she grew up in this amazing castle in Germany, and there was a whole photo shoot on it. And that castle was this amazing place filled with like really modern art. So you have this really cool juxtaposition of this ancient castle and then like pop art in there. And there's like a hallway that was like reclaimed wood, and I have that in the book.
Cool.
So I was like, oh, this is like a good kind of jumping off point for what I want Grey Wolf to look like, and what I want Elodie to look like when Natasha comes into this space, sort of like of the manor born, she's sort of standing there like, this is the real me, this is my real place. And then as far as like the actual appearance of the characters, that's more of a Frankenstein method. That's more of a like mental imagery. I don't really, go through list of actors or anything like that. And they become really real to me in the way that I created them. So then whenever people are like, oh, who would you cast as Braxton or Killian? I'm like, I don't know, because I can see them so clearly in my head. I didn't really have like, an actual actor in mind when I
sometimes it's like just that look, right? Like I used to do the same thing, but now I use Pinterest. But I love Pinterest for that. And so I have secret boards because I don't necessarily want to share my like work in progress with the world. But sometimes I'll see somebody that it's not really that it's them, but it might be like the expression on their face, or like you said, the clothes that they're wearing. And so I totally understand what you're saying. It's like a mood, like an aesthetic.
It is.
What you're going for.
It's either a vibe or a look or an attitude or something that, captures. I really miss magazines.
Yeah. I have a magazine clipping from the Dead Is series. So in the Dead Is series, all the sisters are named after flowers. And there's an actor named Poppy Montgomery. And I read that her sisters all have flower names. And I found my little clipping that I'm like, oh, see, that's why I did that. Like, like how 15?
I know.
Yeah. And that's sometimes you just keep those little pearls, like hoarding them like a dragon.
You do. I remember I was doing a book signing in Paris, several years ago, and they were coming up, and it was like every other girl was named Ella, and I'd never heard the name before. And I love kind of unusual names. I collect them whenever I hear one, I write it down. And before I knew it, I had like a stack of sticky notes with the name Elodie on it.
I've never heard of that
I know,
name
and
either.
I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And like every girl in Paris was named Elodie. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to use that someday. So I just kind of kept it aside for the right character who could wear that name and have it really fit them, So I've named most of my characters that way. They come from a name I've heard before, and I just sort of tuck it away until the right one appears that can carry it.
I do that, and I also look up the meaning of the name.
Yeah, me too.
Because I like right now I'm a project I'm working on. There's somebody whose name means light and somebody's name means dark, and they're antagonists. And so so that's really it's fun to do that.
Layer to
and it's
it.
just it's like fun, like because and then you have to always Google to make sure that there's not like a serial killer with that name or something like that.
I mean, hopefully there's no notorious person with your character's name, and then you're good to go.
Oops. Let me just consult with my.
I don't know if I did that with Stilling Infinity, so we're just gonna hope that we're good. I don't think I give last names though. So.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Do you know their last names
in
your
do know
mind,
their last
right?
names. Yeah, I do, but I don't think they're ever mentioned.
Right,
so.
because I don't know, like, I don't really know that people in the real world really.
I mean, we know Natasha's and we know Elodie's.
Right, but like you don't
Do we
necessarily know
everybody's. I think we know maybe 3 or 4 characters, and it's a big cast. So
yeah. And what did you think the easiest part of working with a big cast and the hardest part of working with a big cast and are you saving some of those minor characters for more?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all told through Natasha's first person experience, so nothing can really happen on without her
that she doesn't know about
and seeing it. Right, there's a prologue that she's not part of, right? But she's pretty much present for everything, so it's really like important to get fully immersed in her and then how she's going to relate to everyone around her. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's a matter of introducing them and then kind of giving them a purpose for being there. Like everybody's got to have a purpose or else they shouldn't even be on your page, right? They're just taking up space. And maybe that purpose won't be fully fleshed out quite yet. So there, if you feel like I'm not really sure what this guy's purpose is, it's gonna show up later on down the line, because it's a series. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of series, you can officially tell us the title of your second.
Yeah, Ruling Destiny. Again, not my title. Someday I'm going to be able to take credit for more than 2 or 3 titles. Ruling Destiny is book 2. We had a cover reveal on Instagram the other day. It's really pretty. It's similar. Beautiful. It's red. There's 2 swords. It's got a little extra pizzazz on there. And that's out in February. I'm working on it like right now. I'm sort of winding my way through the end of revisions on that. So,
and do you keep a series Bible or a list of, plot points that that you're going to have to address, like book number 2, or how do you keep track of that?
Yeah, I do now. With my first series that I ever wrote was The Immortals, and I wrote that first book. And I had only written standalones up until that point. And that was my 8th book. And so I just wrote it like a standalone because that's what I'd been doing and that's what I knew how to do. And I didn't think it was a series. I didn't even know if I was going to try to sell it. I actually wrote that book kind of for myself because I was going through a time of really deep grief. I had lost several people I loved in a row in a very short time. And then my husband I almost lost him. And I wrote it for myself as a sort of healing and trying to make sense of that journey and all those emotions. And when I finished, of course, I'm pragmatic, so I'm like, yeah, we're gonna see if we can sell this. I have a full
do the work.
I'm not just gonna sit on this. But I also realized when I got to the end, like it wasn't the end. I'm like, I just wrote like a series opener. It really isn't the end of anything. It was a launch point for a much bigger journey. And as I got into book 2, because I hadn't like,
Right.
I was like,
There were some places maybe
Oh,
you painted
you're
yourself in a corner a little
no,
bit.
I didn't do that at
That's
all,
good.
luckily. But it was more like just the details of what is that person's eye color again, and
Right.
what's that little weird thing she does when she's nervous. And you want to keep that stuff consistent, because your reader will notice, like,
Yeah.
if someone's eye color changes, they're gonna notice.
And there's always a lag, right? Like there's always like you write the book and then you shop the book and then you get editorial notes for the book, and then the book may come out like a year later. By that time, your head is in a different space. So that's why you have to keep notes.
For me, I get so like bogged down more in like the big picture plot points and like where I'm driving this story, that I can't say that I'm always remembering everybody's eye color, because I'm more interested in
their emotional truth.
and keep the plot driving forward, and make sure that any openings are going to be closed and things like that. So so I went back and I reread Evermore, and I really wrote down like a whole thing for like each character, like however I described them was on that page, whatever their little quirks or tics were, things that they had repetitive saying, whatever, I would just make a full character profile, and then what happened in the book. And then I would go through and I did like a 2-liner of each chapter, like what happened in each chapter.
That's a really good idea.
So I would remember how the story unfolded. And so this time around with Stealing Infinity, I knew it was going to be a series. It was my, I don't know, 3rd, 4th series. I don't even know anymore by that point. And so I knew. I was doing it right off the bat. And if I decided to change something up, like, oh, I want to make this person a little more like this, I would go back and fix that. So it certainly makes writing Ruling Destiny a lot easier, because at least I'm not saying I remember all the stuff, but I have a source to go back to. And I mean, that's what they do in TV shows,
right?
They have these massive story Bibles for the writers to go back for, if you have like, say The Office or something, how many, 7 or 9 seasons, like that's a lot of story to keep track of.
Like, did we already do this?
That was network, so it's like how many 20 some episodes as opposed to like 8 to 10. So you have to, they're really meticulous, and us novel writers could do well by sort of following that example.
In our defense, they have more than one writer on the show.
Have an entire staff. Yes, we are but one.
So, or like editors and copy editors, but still, it is the buck does stop with us.
At the end, it's on us. It's your name on the cover. So if someone forgot an eye color, it's on you.
I did the same thing. I wrote a series Bible, but it was my first series, and it ended up being 8 books. But at first, it was only going to be 3 books, and so that is always like a good lesson. Like, well, just because they only say it's going to start out with 3 books, you don't really know. So please keep good notes, because you're gonna you're gonna need them. But now audiobooks make it easier. I sometimes listen to like the first book when I'm working on a draft of the 3rd book. I've listened to the audiobook just to kind of get back into that world. And I know you don't listen to music when you write, right?
I used to. I don't anymore. But I used to.
I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to do soundtracks. So I would have my soundtrack playlist. And then my playlist would kind of get me into that emotional space. But now it's like, I don't know. I just want quiet when I'm writing.
Yeah, me too. No, I did that too. I used to make these really detailed playlists and stuff. I mean, certainly when I was writing the Immortal series.
Sometimes I'll still have they'll have one song, like the love interest and the main character. They might have like one song, right? Or like one.
I have that for Ruling Destiny, and I was listening to that when I was writing certain scenes. And for Stealing Infinity, there were times when I would put on classical music, because Grey Wolf is a place of a lot of luxury and refinement.
Right.
And in order to, time travel successfully and safely, they have to be able to blend into that timeline. So in this place called Grey Wolf, they only have access to classical music.
Oh,
And they have these like elaborate, they dress for dinner and they have these elaborate 5-course meals, and they are allowed to drink, wine or champagne with dinner, not to get inebriated by any means, but because they have to be able to know how to like conduct themselves when they go to Versailles or in a place like that, So, in some ways it's sort of like a finishing school in that, they have to learn these like, manners and the rituals around manners and dining and all that. And on the other hand, they're learning sword fighting and
so kind of almost like a spy school too, because that's like a thing about spies. They have to kind of integrate into that world. And so that sounds like the same thing with the time travelers.
Right.
They have to.
What they are not doing is taking algebra and chemistry class.
So dream world.
I mean, really, it would have been my high school dream world. I would have been a lot less apathetic if I got sent to Grey Wolf Academy. I'll tell you that.
Sign me up. Wait, is it too late to time travel back and like
I don't know,
relive our high school life?
Figure it out by the time I'm done with this series.
Well, you do a lot of research, right?
I do.
You do tons of research for your I know we talked about that a little bit before, but like, do you want to talk about a little bit about like the research you did specifically for Stealing Infinity as far as like time travel?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many time travel stories and shows and ways to address that and explore it. And I didn't go and watch all that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying I did anything original by any means. I just didn't want to be overtly influenced by it.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to make it my own, but to fit within the rules that I set up, if that makes sense. So, I read a lot of books on like the physics of time travel and how theoretically we should be able to do it if we could find a way to not get crushed when going to
minor detail.
But they have figured this out at Grey Wolf, so it's actually quite easy. It requires a lot of power, but it's actually quite easy. But the theoretics of it were really interesting. Reading up on that stuff, reading up on history, like, oh my gosh, in high school I did not like history. I was in AP history and I don't even know what I was doing there.
But I loved your little Instagram things on this day. Remember when you did those? And she would have like a little history, note about what happened in the world.
Yeah.
The only time I care is like if Prince's album came out, then I'll be like, oh yeah, that's it.
I did want a Prince.
I know.
I think you might have hit the heart or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, this book in particular, they go to Versailles, so I did a lot of research on this particular event that took place in Versailles because I didn't want to make up a party. I wanted to use a real one, that actually.
But that can be really interesting because when you're reading the research, like sometimes there's some really fascinating details about specifics that you can use, and it just makes that scene more interesting and richer and like also more fun, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can get like a couple
for sure. And all the art, the book it's heavy on art. Grey Wolf is filled with art and great art, and some of them still art. And I love art. And so part of this whole theme was born from really the pandemic. I had taken 5 years off from writing YA and kind of writing in general. And I thought, I don't know, maybe I'm retired. I wrote like 26 books in a relatively short amount of time. And I just was kind of burnt out and I needed a break. And then, we had the pandemic and we were all under quarantine. And I mean, I work at home anyways. For many years I have, so I can't say it was like this big shift or change for me, but I was kind of like, well, now I have to be home in my house.
Yeah, it's different when you're like, I just want to be home versus I'm stuck here.
Now I'm stuck at home. And, and the world was feeling very scary. There was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, especially early on with all that. And it wasn't like a particularly great place to be in. And so I thought, I'm just going to create my own. And I've had this idea for a really long time. So I'm just going to start like delving into some research surrounding this. That's always how I kind of start, So I was looking researching art and time travel and physics and Versailles and just all the different elements that you find in the book. Numerology and tarot, it's all in there. And then I started writing it. And, I found myself for the first time in really quite a while, like really enjoying the process again. Partly because once you start publishing regularly, now you're writing to, you have deadlines and you have expectations either from your publishers or from your readers, and you're trying to meet these things. And yeah, it's super creative and it's a privilege to be able to do that. But there is sort of a job element to it as well. You have like a real defined end goal in mind. And this time around, there was no deadline. There was no expectation. There was nothing. I didn't know if anyone would even be interested in this thing. I had always heard time travel is like really hard to sell in YA, but I just like, I don't even care. I'm just going to write this thing and see what happens. I'm not going to listen to that sort of dissenting noise. And so I just kind of went to my own world and just would sit there for hours on end. And God, what a great escape it was from this world we were living in, because I was just creating my own thing that was interesting to me and that I could control sort of the outcomes and
And art's inspiring and healing and just like it's evocative of so many emotions that like it just has to like I know a lot of people during the pandemic, that's what they would do. They would do online. We used to do online museums. We would like look at which museum can we look at? Just because it was just like the world was a terrible place and it really sucked. And
I was doing online tours of like certain sections of the Louvre where they would have like a guide take you around and talk to you about the art. And, and I was thinking about all these amazing art museums all over the world and they're empty. Like that art's just sitting on the wall and, I mean, it's probably breathing and appreciating some space, but, not getting photographed all the time. But there was just something really poignant about that as well. So it was just, the whole thing was sort of born out of that. And I just was including things that I like, things that interest me. I mean, if you want to write, I wouldn't say write what I would say write what interests you, because then the research is fun. You really enjoy it. And I was, now as an adult, I'm fascinated with history and I'm not like a good history scholar or anything like that, but I'm really interested in it. I like reading about it, which is my teenage self is like, what,
But I think also like, how it is given to you, how the information is given to you can make a huge difference. Like when you're in high school, you know what I mean? If it's like, okay, remember that, and
it was like memorizing
dates, right?
Dates and just like really dry.
Yeah. Instead of the really interesting, fascinating things that like maybe they didn't even include in textbooks that you have to dig to find. Yeah. And that's like,
or just I like maybe that. Humanizing the players involved, the people involved. It was just a bunch of like really heroic white men doing amazing things. And that was history when I was growing up. And it's like, all right, how's that relatable? Seriously. And there's more to that story. And there were more to those men as we're learning. So, and I don't know that half of that's, I don't know. I don't even want to go there, but it just was so unrelatable. And,
and I think that that's part of it is like, if you are able to find a way to make history kind of come alive, which sounds like what you were doing, you were making history come alive in a interesting, fun way, instead of like, well, we're not going to talk about this and we're not going to talk about that. And we're not going to talk about the things that, Ben Franklin was up to or, whatever. Yeah. I think that that's the difference is it's
not, I don't want to get the impression that it's super heavy on the history because it's not.
Because it's time travel.
They immerse in it, and kind of a more glamorous aspect of it,
Yeah, I really like the art theme because I think, I don't know anyone who says, I don't like art. Like, like everyone in the world can find a painting or a piece of art or a poem or whatever that they can relate to. And I think that's what's really exciting about Stealing Infinity is because you've incorporated that into
Yeah.
your novel.
Yeah.
So,
It
yay
was-
you.
Yeah. Yay me.
So, should we take questions from does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
So I just saw in your bio, I guess in the back flap,
hmm
that you lived in
Mykonos.
and
Yeah.
Europe. So did
Mhm.
that inspire any of your writing in this book
In this book,
or other books?
probably not. But so I wrote 2 books earlier that took place there. One was a young adult called Cruel Summer. And in that book, the character's parents are getting divorced. And so wanting to like spare her of sort of the acrimonious situation between them, they send her to live with an aunt in Tinos. And so Tinos, when I lived in Mykonos was like the cool island, and Tinos was like this little island across from it that you could see from me. We could see Tinos. Tinos could see us. It was just like not very far away, and so it was like I can't even get to the cool island for this girl. She's stuck in Tinos, looking at Mykonos. And she does get a trip to Mykonos. And then I wrote an adult book called Fly Me to the Moon, and is about a flight attendant. And I was a flight attendant. So I like to say that I did 12 years of research working for Delta Airlines, specifically for that book. And New York City based flight attendant, which is what I was. And there is a part of the book where she ends up in Mykonos for a time. And I really, really took from that a lot. Yeah, I took from that experience a lot. So I think, as a writer, like all of my life is in these books, it just always ends up there in one way or another. There's always some sort of like autobiographical element to it. I would say in Stealing Infinity, it's Natasha in high school, and just how she felt and how maybe the adults in her life weren't really there for her. Just because they didn't really have the bandwidth to be there for her, and how lost she felt because of that, and how unsafe and unprotected in the world. And that's how I felt. And so, I could put a lot of myself in that. It was, have you been to Mykonos?
I've seen it on Instagram, especially during Pride.
Yeah.
Always people there.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, what can I say? It's really different now from when I lived there. I went back to Greece, like 19 years after I left after I, stopped living there. I was on a book tour in Europe. It was like 5 weeks all over Europe. And one of my stops was Athens. And then I was going to go from there on to Portugal or something like that. I can't remember how it went. But I had a few days between, say, Athens and Lisbon. And so my husband was with me, and I said, we should take those few days, between signings, and let's go to Mykonos because it's been 19 years. And so we're like really excited. And it was the end of the season, because Mykonos is seasonal, right? It's kind of just a summer place, and it shuts down for the winter, with good reason, because it's kind of miserable. It's like really windy and cold and rainy and damp and not so great to be there. And I think it was like maybe October or something. And, we're flying in, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of villas. Like looks really built up, and then we get out, to get a rental car. My husband's like, should we get a map? I'm like, I've lived here. I know this place. This is my place. And I totally got us lost because it had changed so much. I mean, when I lived there, it was like dirt roads and, old ladies on donkeys selling eggs off the, and now there's like a Nobu, a Louis Vuitton, and a Starbucks. So it changed a lot, but it's still spectacular. It is. It's just way more built up.
So of our virtual questions,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to rephrase one of them because you partly answered it. So you said you don't really listen to music anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but you mentioned classical music.
Yeah.
What any particular classical songs you listened for the first one, and did you listen to any for writing the second one?
So I would listen to, if I mentioned a song you know. So they have these what they're called slabs, right? There's no they're not taking selfies at Great Wolf Academy. Their phones have been confiscated, and they have, you know, these slabs, and that's how their communicator is summoned. And so you know, they're greeted every morning with like the inspirational quote of the day, and you know, at curfew at 10 p.m. it'll blast like a Beethoven's Fifth or something like that, you know. So if I mentioned the song, I wanted to listen to it, so I would be familiar with what that sounded like. Sometimes I would just keep listening to that, you know, or Vivaldi or Beethoven or Mozart. Sometimes I would put on the Bridgerton.
I love the
soundtrack.
Bridgerton soundtrack.
Because how great is that? I mean, seriously. And you know, what is it? It's who's Vitamin A? What is the name of the
composer,
the symphony that plays all those songs? I think it's like
I don't know.
Vitamin A or something. I don't know. Anyways, sometimes I would listen to like the Bridgerton soundtrack because it was still within the classical, you know, sound, but a little more contemporary. I mean, I like both, but.
Well, another internet question. What do you find the hardest part of the writing process?
I would say, because as an author, I'll speak for myself, but I have a feeling the majority of us feel this way. You can see so clearly what you want to say and what you want it to look like and what you want the experience to be. And for me, transferring that movie in my head, because that's kind of what it is, into words on a page is always really the struggle. Like, for me, I feel like I get as close as I can, and I don't know if I ever really get quite there, because I'm working with two different things, right? I'm working with pictures, and I'm trying to put that into words. And so it's just that struggle of like trying to give you the picture that I'm seeing in my head in a way that I hope you can see it too. But of course, you will never see it like I see it, because we're both going to approach any work of art or any piece of creativity through our own filters, right? Through our own perspective. So I don't think any two people view a piece of art the same way. I don't think any people read a book the same way or listen to music the same way. We're all coming at the world with our own perceptions, our own projections, our own biases that we may be aware of or not aware of. And that's how we're taking something in. So all I can do is like try to put that picture on the page for you, and then you will take that where you take it.
Do you ever, then connected to that, do you ever then approach when you have beta readers, and then like any particular scenes that you really want to make sure comes across just as you wrote it? Do you ask them, okay, how did you interpret that or anything like that?
Yeah, my husband is my beta reader.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's not like as random as it sounds, like I just hand it to my husband. He's like, you know, he's a really big part of the process. Like, as I'm really plotting a book out, I mean, we have full dinner conversations about it. He's taken, you know, like the Robert McKee seminar with me on, you know, story structure and all that. So he's like, he's really good at story structure. We are probably miserable to watch TV with, because we'll be like, you know, calling out like, oh, that's the theme stated, or, you know.
I told my twins about Dark Night of the Soul.
Uh-huh.
And so like, I think we started talking about it when they were like in 4th grade.
So are they on the lookout now?
So like for 2 years straight, when we were watching TV, every time we would be watching it, they'd be like, Dark Night of the Soul, Dark Night of the Soul.
So we could watch TV together.
Yes, we could. And but please never watch. I hope my eldest daughter is not listening or watching this, but never watch TV with a film major.
Oh yeah.
Ever.
Right. Yeah.
Are there any like queer or LGBTQ characters in the book? Is there romance?
Yes. There are Finn and Oliver, who are a couple in the book. There is Song, I don't want to tell you what happened, but she's yeah. And Mason, who you will meet like right off the bat.
Awesome. I'm just curious.
I actually try to do that in all of my books, where, I mean, we're organically necessary and possible, like not just to like shove it in there, like, oh, let's just make this but like, because this is our world that we live in, and these are who my friends are. And so, yeah, I don't want to say every book and I'll be wrong, but I think nearly every book of mine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you want, both of you can answer this one too, because it's a, like, oh, I like this. Do you have any favorite modes of time travel, whether from books, movies, or shows?
I do. You
Go
probably
ahead.
do too, because you're such a nerd. Right? She's such a nerd. I still love her.
She does.
I do.
She loves me.
I really
And I love her.
loved. Did you guys see Dark?
Oh,
Netflix?
I did.
Okay.
It's like the Swedish. Is it Swedish
It's
or
German.
Norwegian? Okay, I knew it was like really dark. Like it's like you can barely see what's happening on screen, right? Like
Sometimes, yeah.
It's very
So it was
visually dark.
It's a series on Netflix, and it's a time travel series.
Yeah.
It is so cool. I loved it. I watched it twice. My husband, I loved it so much. Should I tell him this? He made it, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Did you watch it?
No.
Okay, it's very complicated.
Highly recommend it if you like
totally
time
worth
travel.
a watch. But it is complicated, and he made this huge spreadsheet of how everybody interrelated to everybody. And so if you do watch it and want to borrow that spreadsheet,
I might have to borrow.
I can scan it. I can scan. It's big. It's big. Yeah. They're very complicated. But in Dark, I don't think this is a spoiler, but there was tunnels that they would crawl through. I mean, it was as simple as like crawling through this tunnel, and now you're in 1980 something, and now this other one you were in 1930 something. I think they were like 50 or 60 years apart, something like that. I don't know. It's pretty cool. I really liked it. I mean, enough to watch it twice and make a spreadsheet. So how about you?
My old standby, and this might not be technically a time travel novel, but A Wrinkle in Time is one of my absolute favorites. Old school, but I like them all. Like if it has time travel in it, I'm there.
Yeah.
Like, although I read Outlander, but I know I write vampire novels, but Alyson was giving me a hard time about this. I'm super wimpy, so I have a hard time seeing any violence on screen. So like anytime like there's anything like stabby on screen, I might hide my eyes, which I know it's really weird because I write about stabby things all the time, but it's different when it's in a book. Yes, because I feel okay, honestly, after Life of the Party, I really wanted to like stab some people, like
you're being recorded. This is going to show up in a court of law
virtually
someday.
Yeah, like allegedly. No, but like and this, it was so interesting. It was just on Instagram. Someone was talking about Steven Tyler, the singer Steven Tyler. So this came up in my research for the Afterlife of the Party, which is why the vampires, I wanted to stab them because they're in a band. Steven Tyler gained custody of his 15 or 16-year-old girlfriend, like custody. He became her guardian.
I don't think that was Steven Tyler.
You should look it up. It's Steven Tyler. I'm very sorry. It's like, it's highly documented. She had to change her name. Like,
when?
Like, this was a long time ago, like in the 70s. But he was not the only rock star who did this. So I'm just saying that's why I was feeling stabby, is there was a lot of
oh boy.
When you research, sometimes when you research stuff, you find out some disturbing stuff about your heroes. About your heroes, and that's all I have to say.
This is not what I'm researching.
So that's, I feel stabby. I wouldn't actually be stabby.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I couldn't, right? I can't stand the sight of blood.
As you were writing this, did you have like any ideas of like spin-off or like other parts? Because when you think of time travel, I think of like Doctor Who and how you go through time.
That's another good one, Doctor Who.
Right, and I think about like all these places he leaves behind, and I'm like, wouldn't it be great to find out what happens as a
Yeah.
result of the people visiting this
Yeah.
area?
That's
Yeah.
really a
I'm
great-
always thinking in terms of spin-off or, sequel, prequel, like if there's other places to take the story, once this particular journey is concluded. Yeah, I'm always thinking in terms of that. I mean, once you create the world and you're in it, you don't want to overstay your visit in it, but there is something about really enjoying this world you created and trying to maybe find if there's somewhere else you could take it and something else you could do with it. I don't know that I will, but I've certainly jotted down some notes about where it could possibly go once this is concluded. Yeah.
And is it a three books?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have a third title yet?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm waiting
Just
for them
checking.
to give it to me.
All right. Everybody in the chat start.
I don't know if this is spoilery with your future books, but if you can answer, will we get a dual POV in this series?
Oh, well, okay, here's something that I should say. I just kind of realized this tonight. I don't know why. So if people read, and a lot of people read the ARCs because they sent out like a lot of really cool promo boxes. So a lot of people read the ARCs and, either from the box that they got or from NetGalley. But the hard copy has Braxton's point of view. It has a bonus chapter. So you do get Braxton's point of view in this bonus chapter at the end in the hard copy, and probably the finished ebook as well. Just the ARCs did not contain that. And in book 2, I can say you definitely will. It's not going to be told in dual POV, but you will get his POV at one point or another.
I'm very excited. Heather says, yes, we got a Braxton POV.
Oh, this is Heather.
Makes me.
Heather is worried about Braxton.
That's good.
Heather
Yeah.
says yes.
Yeah.
If you could dabble in another genre, which one would it be?
I'd like to write adult again, and maybe you'll never read it. Maybe something on the scary side.
No, I'll read it. I just can't watch it if they make it into a
Maybe
television
you're
show.
not coming to the premiere. Okay, got it. Maybe, I guess it's not another genre really. Maybe just an adult version of a supernatural. I mean, my last adult book that I wrote was more of like a contemporary romantic comedy. And that was super fun to write. But I would love to write an adult supernatural. Yeah.
Who's your favorite character after Natasha?
Probably Elodie, because she's such a shapeshifter. We can't figure her out. I mean, I can't. But she comes off as perhaps quite evil, but I don't like to write a one note evil. I think people are complex and they do things for very complex reasons, so we don't quite fully understand who Elodie is or why she's doing the things she is. I've given hints, but I haven't fully unpacked that. But I will say this, writing like the more villainous character is always more fun, right? Because their behavior is always boundary pushing. They're always saying the things you're not supposed to say, but there's a delight in being able to write that, and they're pushing buttons and pushing boundaries, and they're always way more fun to write. So.
And they usually get like the fun lines.
They get the fun lines.
And we love morally gray characters.
Yeah.
We do. We really love them because no one is all pure,
Yeah.
Nobody wants a Mary Sue, right? Like nobody wants
Right.
anybody who's like perfectly lovely and nobody wants somebody who's like one note, kicking puppies.
I mean, it doesn't even exist.
Right.
So that Mary Sue's hiding something somewhere.
Mary Sue's the real.
which appeals to you more, writing standalone books or series?
I really like writing series because it's kind of like lately I've been watching more like series and limited series than I have movies because I like how you can really unpack a character and really take them on a much deeper, much bigger journey than you can in the scope of, 300 to 400 pages. So, I mean, I get to take this crew, it'll probably end up being 1,200 pages all told, so there's just so much more room to explore and really plumb the depths of who they are, what they're capable of, challenge them and see what they're really made of. And that's really fun for me. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? And we have one more virtual.
Okay.
What is on your to be read pile?
Oh gosh. I just like got sunk down in guilt. I have had Lee Bardugo's Ninth House for since it came out. So I don't know, it's up in a year. So that's sitting there. I have The Maidens by Alex. Okay. Yeah. That's on my pile. I literally have an entire shelf of shame that's kind of like adjacent to my computer, and it's just all the books that I need to read, and there's just no time. But I will say I did a podcast recently, and I had to pick, it was the Legendarium. So if you listen to them, they were great, and they wanted me to pick a book, and then we discussed the book, right? So I picked Rebecca. And then after I went, oh, this is kind of like a sci-fi fantasy podcast. I told them to read Rebecca. Should I have done that? Oh, well. So I didn't have time to reread it. I've read it so many times. I still have the paperback that I read in high school. I mean, that's how many times I've read this book, and I've kept it all these years. So I listened to the audio version of it, and the audio version of it's terrific. And that was like the last book I read, and it was very recently, but it was on audio because I'm so busy with revisions right now that looking at the screen all day, by the end of the day, my eyes literally are shot and I can't really read. So I'll listen to an audiobook.
Well, whenever you get to The Maidens, I love that. I can't wait for you.
Well, I read the one, what was the first one that he wrote?
The Silent Patient.
Yeah. I read that. Loved it. So I'm really excited to get to The Maidens.
It has some Silence of the Lamb vibes in it.
Oh, I'm all in. She's not, but I am.
Oh my gosh. So not only am I exactly like Alyson, that there's not enough time in the day to write, but I have 2 14-year-olds, and fortunately they are excellent readers, and they are always giving me recommendations of what they want to read. And I saw that book right there on your list, and it's a fantasy with a trans teen. Gosh, I can't remember the title. It's his first book. DJ, do you know it?
Fantasy trans teen.
It's right there, right over there. No, it's hang on.
Because I'm thinking,
Traveling.
Oh, that just came out.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one of the minis recommended this book highly. She read it in a day. One day, my child finished it.
Oh, that's a gorgeous cover.
Yeah, beautiful cover. Anyway, so
all right.
I don't know this author, but my kids. So I'm always my pile gets bigger and bigger and bigger because my kids are always.
Yeah.
So I was escaping a cold.
Did you read it?
No. My friend got it signed at ALA. I'm waiting for my copy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I also read. Oh gosh, it's a Jen Lyons book.
Part of the series.
The first one. I just listened to that one on audiobook.
Ruin of Kings.
Yes, I finished that. In fact, I told Alyson when we saw it, when we were browsing, I was like, I'm like, that's one of the best fantasy novels I've read this year. I know it came out a few because she's got 4 out now, right? But I'm again, see the TBR.
Yeah.
Very, very. So those are the two things that I've read lately. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Just
Yeah,
I
I
also
listen
listen to
to-
podcasts. Like I listen to it's called Script Notes, which is a screenwriting podcast. And I love that. And I listen to it if I'm driving. I'll listen to it all the time. So if you are a author or a writer and you're interested in different forms of writing, those two screenwriters have a lot of interesting things to say that I think apply to any form of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, story is story.
Yeah.
So I use screenwriting methods to plot my books. So I mean, it's all. I mean, it's story is story.
Yeah.
So.
All of it, like
Yeah.
magazines,
Yeah.
TV,
Sure.
movies, books.
I mean, yeah,
all of
watching
it.
TV is just as useful for
Yeah.
writing if you start understanding structure and pacing and all of that. If I really like an audiobook, though, I will go buy the physical book because it's a different experience.
Yes.
And now I want to take my time with the words and I want to like revisit passages and stuff like that. So, that just makes my library even bigger, but I always do that.
Yeah, like especially like if you're reading something that like just has amazing world building or great dialogue and you're listening to it, then you do want to see it on the page too. So
I
by all
listened
forms.
to Walter Isaacson's biography on Leonardo da Vinci for research for Ruling Destiny. And there was so much useful stuff in there. I'm like, I actually need this book, so I got the book as well. It's a beautiful book. It's like a really heavy, it's probably the heaviest book I have. And it's got like a lot of, the pages are really nice. And it's got a lot of like his artwork in there. And it's a gorgeous book. And it was really interesting. So yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah, I always have like research books to read too.
Yeah.
Right. Like
yeah.
there's always on top of like regular, just fun reading.
Right,
There's like always
reading.
research reading or I don't know.
Yeah.
All sorts of. Yes, it's my job. I have to read.
All right. Well, unless anyone else has any questions, I guess we'll call it there. Thank you so much, everyone.
Guys.
Thank you
so much.
Great questions, internet people. We're going to go ahead and cut the stream now to begin the in-store signing. Thank you.